That music means it's time for the Hillsdale Dialogue, the last radio hour of the week, the last hour of the Salem News Channel of my program during the week. And that means usually, as is the case this week, Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, joins us. Dr. Arnn, welcome back. We enjoyed talking to Dean Spalding last week, but we know you've been busy. We all saw you, at least most of us saw you, give the eulogy for Charlie Kirk 2 weeks back. I'd like to begin there. Can you tell me how that came to be and how you decided to go about it? It was very elegant, it was very eloquent, and it was precise in timing. How did that all come together, and why did they ask you to do it?
I met Charlie when he was 19, and 19-year-olds are my specialty. So he was becoming famous, and I wondered if he deserved it. So I asked him some hard questions, and he couldn't answer them. And he said, "What do I do?" And I said, I told him my favorite Lincoln story. Lincoln decided to learn how to prove a thing. So he went home, left his law apprentice work, and memorized all the propositions in the books of Euclid. And I said to Charlie, "That's real ambitious. And, just trying to get ahead quicker than anybody else is not that ambitious." And Charlie took that to heart. And this all is a commentary on him. He's a very remarkable man. He started taking online courses. He would take them and pass the exam and text me to my cell phone, holding his certificate. And he did that 31 times. I think he took more than that, but I got 31 texts from him. And I just watched him grow and learn. And it was very remarkable. And he built a great institution. He basically built it between the ages of 18 and 31 when he was killed. And he could run it like a charm. He was very close to Donald Trump. He moved around in the high centers of power. And he kept learning. He took the time. Erica, his widow, wonderful woman, read from things she discovered in his journals, 3 different stories. And those are all stories. Those are basically notes on our online course on Aristotle. Charlie not only took the course, he wrote out notes at night into a journal for a lot of things, including that. And so what a lovely man. And I loved him. And he treated me like his teacher. And so Erica called me the day after he was shot and asked me if I would speak at the memorial service. And I went out there and did it, and very proud to do it. Long day, lots of speakers. I was second and shortest of them all. And it was a very honorable thing to do. I mean, it was a combination memorial service, revival, Christian revival, and conservative political revival, and all those features work together somehow. I don't know much about gospel music, but if you were there, first of all, we entered that place at 8:15 in the morning, I think is when I walked in there, and for 2 hours from about 9:15 until the thing started, these people, 4 main people, sang. And I looked them up. I didn't know who they were. They were very good. And they get $1 million a gig, sort of gospel popular music. And they're good at it. And they did all that for free. So it was a heck of a show. I liked the speakers best who talked about Charlie. It was such a big deal that there's a temptation for people who understand about power to talk about themselves. And some did that, but mostly they didn't. And some were really great. I thought Marco Rubio was very good. Yeah, so that's how that came to be. His widow asked me to do it. And I'm having to do with her now in various ways. I'm going to try to be helpful to her. In memory of, she's a great woman. And her husband was, it's funny. I don't have this experience with anybody else. But, I have a lot of students who've gone on to do great things. And I've watched them grow up and enjoyed it. Charlie is like that, except he didn't come to Hillsdale College except remotely, but he did do it remotely, and he learned a lot. He was a super young man.
I only heard from Charlie on non-political things when he would call to discuss a Hillsdale dialogue or text to discuss a Hillsdale dialogue. Nothing that I said, something that you had said, and he kept encouraging me to continue doing the Hillsdale dialogues because he was methodically making his way through the 800-plus dialogues that there are, and some of them would get him excited, and it's fun. And that must be what you run into at Hillsdale all the time. Young people are engaging with ideas and finding out that being curious is its own reward. When you addressed 70,000 people, had you addressed a crowd of that size before?
No, not even close. I don't know. Maybe 5,500 is the most. I think we can get 5,500 in our indoor commencement place. And we've had it full. So that's probably the biggest ever. And it's, what's that like? Have you done that, Hugh?
No, I've only talked to about 10,000 people, not bigger than that.
Yeah. Well, after a certain point, it doesn't matter how many there are. First of all, Erica asked me to talk 10 minutes, so I was prepared to do that. I actually thought that I would talk about 7. But sometime 15 or 20 feet before I got to the microphone, somebody told me, one of the people running the show told me I only had 3 minutes. I said, okay. And then she sort of emphasized that. And I said, are you going to hit me? And she said, no. And I said, do you want to go out there and do it? And she said, no. And so I walked out there, and there was a counter going, and I stopped at 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And, I had thought about it a lot, and so I was ready to do it. And
well, I want to give you a compliment. I thought that your story about having a list of 10 or 11 young people that you carry around with you, that you keep, of people of unusual promise, and that Charlie was on that list, is the kind of story that cannot be made up. It has to be true. It's the kind of tribute that cannot be completely conjured out of nothing. It's got to be real. And I'm wondering, have you been inundated by the other 10 asking if they're on the list yet, or is everyone just content not to know that they are or are? 2 of them, and I don't tell the others. I don't tell any of them who's on the list because, I have a lot of students and I treasure them all. There are some of them that just seem to me very remarkable, and there are 2 who are on the list, and they both called me more than once to urge me to say that Charlie was the best of all my students. And I said, I'm not going to do that. And they said, why? And I said, there are others. And, that's, I know how that goes, right? I studied with a couple of great teachers, and I was pretty good, but a lot of people were pretty good. And that's the kind of, who is the best student of Harry Jaffa? My candidate is Thomas G. West. If not he, Thomas Silver, who died young. But I'm up there somewhere. And the point is, you really better not to know where. Well, that is actually scriptural. When one of the apostles asked, can I sit on your right and on your left? The answer is a disquisition on not asking for that place. So it's something that's better not known. But I thought it was an elegant testimony to Charlie. Did he ever visit campus? I don't recall that he did. He did?
Several times. Yeah, he came. There's a guy named Bob Olson, who's a friend of ours, and he was in my remarks, but, he got left on the cutting room floor, as did 3/4 of it. And he was one of the people pestering me about Charlie Kirk. And, there's a reason why I don't think that we ought to be flattering much of anybody, and certainly not 19-year-olds, because they've got their growth before them. And anyway, he was bugging me about Charlie and how great Charlie was. And Charlie had started taking the online courses, but he dragged him to campus and came with him. And that was a grand visit. That was fun. And and then that's, I don't remember when that was, some years ago. But I began to know Charlie more. I had contact with him regularly after that first time.
I have a couple of questions about Turning Point after we come back from the break. Don't go anywhere, America. This is one of our Hillsdale Dialogues. We'll return to Churchill next week in World War II for one of our dialogues where we talk about recent events, so don't go anywhere. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That's Dr. Arnn. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu.
You know the Robertson family from the hit TV show Duck Dynasty. Now Hillsdale College offers you the unique opportunity to learn alongside the Robertsons as they dive deep into Hillsdale's online course, The Genesis Story. Every Friday on the Unashamed podcast, the Robertsons will share their insights and perspectives, learning from Hillsdale Professor of English Justin Jackson. Take a trip down south to Louisiana for this one-of-a-kind learning experience we call Unashamed Academy. Visit unashamedforhillsdale.com and enroll today. That's unashamed, F-O-R, Hillsdale.com to experience the Genesis story alongside the Robertsons.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. It's been more than 3 weeks since Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and Dr. Arnn, more than 2 weeks ago, participated in his memorial service, and we're talking about him last segment on this week's Hillsdale Dialogue, and we'll turn to a couple of things after the break. Dr. Arnn, what do you think happened to TPUSA? I ran into the head of the TPUSA on the University of Connecticut campus at an event I did the Monday after your eulogy and everyone else's eulogy at Charlie's memorial service, and that young person told me they had doubled their membership in the 2 weeks since Charlie had been murdered, and that they were full of energy and vitality. I hope that continues. I don't know that it will. What do you think will happen?
Well, it's an important thing, and I'm going to try to be helpful to it. Probably can. I'm seeing Erica soon. But first of all, it's going to be bigger, and it's going to have a lot of steam. And the people there are believers in Jesus, for the most part, almost all, and in the mission of Turning Point. So they'll attack it with energy. Charlie was a singular man, and so they'll miss that, and it would be a rare accident if it had all of his qualities in one person. But they're going to be important and good, and they come. Another thing is they come at a right time, and they've helped provoke it being the right time too, because one thing that's going on in the country is people are lost. There's we're reading Churchill here next time we talk, and he's writing about a period in British history where there was despair in high places, and there's despair all over the place in America, but there's also revival. And Charlie, what I respect about him so much is I know the labor he went to turn himself into such a serious man. And that's his seriousness, right? Because he would spend hours at a time with Donald Trump. And for a young man, that's got to be an especially, intoxicating experience, although neither Charlie nor Trump was a drinker. And he kept his mind on ultimate things at the same time. And that's the mark of a statesman. Well, it was manifest in his work when he would go and do what he was doing at the moment of his assassination, which was to sit down with people and reason and give them a fair chance and reason back with them. And that's very powerful. And you have to be a serious man to be able to do that. And so they will continue to do that, and they will find people who are serious, I predict, because the service itself and many other things going on in the society are signs of revival. And we need serious people, and we seem to be getting more of them. And turning
now, by revival, we'll talk about after the break the fact that it was 10/7, second anniversary this week, and what has happened since then. But on Tuesday, 10/7, I talked with Aviv Radig-Gur. It's over at my YouTube channel. People want to see it. He's a Jew in Israel who actually welcomes Christian revival in the United States because the American brand of revivalism tends to be very good for freedom. And he explained at length why that is. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Christianity is, Charlie and I, this is a main theme, right? Christianity is, you have to, first of all, if you understand the study of politics as it comes to us from the classics and up to today, you can step back from a regime, a way of political system, and categorize it, think how it relates to others. Well, Christianity, do that for Christianity. Judaism, which is a marvel, one of the pillars of Western civilization. It's 2,000 years older than Socrates, and it claims to be one God for everybody and to be a blessing for everybody. The covenant with Abraham, this will be a blessing to all the peoples on the face of the earth. So that's just incredible. You just look at religion at the time, it's familial and tribal. And here's universal. Also, a God who is good. One of the reasons the Romans destroyed the Carthaginians was they were deeply offended, as they ought to have been, by the practice of the Carthaginians to sacrifice their babies to their gods. So it's just good religion. With ancient characteristics, too, some of them. Well, it sets up a polity, a classic political regime. God appoints the rulers. He gives the laws. He approves or disapproves of the rulers. And it is the rulers, not for everybody in Judaism, but for the chosen people who undertake a very hard duty, which they perform to this day for the world. That's one kind. The Athenian or Spartan, especially in the time before Socrates, this was changing some by then. Their way was that the gods of the city were the ancestors of the leading families in the cities. That's a kind of thing. And the law and revelation are the same thing. They're one thing, right? Jesus comes along and he does something still unprecedented. He claims to be the savior of all, the maker of all, the cause of all. And then he says, my kingdom is not of this world. Sometimes Christians, I've been in an argument with one of them lately, his reply is the kingdom of Christ is everything. True enough. But it's not a kingdom in the way that we mean that ordinary word, because the king's not here. And he doesn't appoint rulers, and there's not a structure of governance in the New Testament. You can't find it in the way that it's all over the Old Testament of the Bible. So there you go. You're going to have one ruler and savior for all mankind, but you're going to have separate polities. And if you're going to have that, then there has to be freedom of religion.
Amen.
Christianity is also
Amen. Pause right there, Doctor, and we'll come back after break and pick up on that because it leads us right to 10-7.
This show is a part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to your favorite. You'll get brand new episodes of all your favorite shows sent right to your device, and you'll help us know that you're out there listening. Never miss another episode by going to podcast.hillsdale.edu/subscribe. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu/subscribe. Or click the follow or subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue underway. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. All prior Hillsdale Dialogues are found at hughforhillsdale.com. Dr. Arnn, so that leads to the question about 10-7. What Haviv Reddy Gur said on the second anniversary of 10-7 this week is he welcomed Christian revival. My question to him was, what is going to happen in Israel? Are they going to forget the lessons of 10-7 in the way that I think America has forgotten some of the lessons of 9/11? What do you think about that?
Well, they'll be less likely to do that than we are because the problem is very near and ever present.
That's exactly what he said. We're a big country with a lot of oceans.
Yeah, it's different, And, what I hope for, by the way, is the political reform of Islam. There's an argument that it tries to be both a universal and a political religion, and there's an argument even that that's in its roots. But that's a prescription for despotism. And, the great philosophers, modern and ancient, all wrote that. You can't have one country for every person on earth because people differ a lot and they don't speak the same language. They don't live near each other. And so if there's some principle of rule that comes from outside, above, and nobody has any say over it, then whatever mortal man or woman is speaking for that is in utter control. So think of the poor people in Iran who don't like those mullahs, or Gaza for that matter. What say have they, in fact, in what's happening in their country? And if they disagree, they better keep their mouth shut. So the political reform of Islam would be to understand that you don't get to govern. In other words, understand the natural law principle of freedom of religion.
Separation of church and state. Now, that did happen in Turkey, right? After the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the original impulse of the reformers was to separate Islam from the government, and the government would be secular, and Islam would be the majoritarian religion.
And separation of church and state is not quite the right expression. A form of it comes from Thomas Jefferson, but the truth is, religion is terribly important to politics. Whatever you think, it will have much to do with politics, whatever you think about God. And our own regime is constant appeals to God, but to the laws of nature and of nature's God. That is to say, come to find out at the moral, which is in this case is a synonym for the word political level, what reason tells us and what revelation tells us is the same thing. And so you rule in the name of that. And it's very good for America. The founders of America are almost uniform on this point. It's very good for America, for Christianity to thrive. And the two greatest, and now maybe this is the third, it might be too soon to tell, but I suspect it is, movement or crisis turning point in American history is deeply affected by religious movements, both the Great Awakening and the founding, and the abolitionist, temperance, social reform, Christian movements leading up to the Civil War. And now there seems to be some Christian revival underway in America. And I think that's a wholly good thing. And I also think that Christians need to understand that doesn't give them, being a Christian, doesn't give them the title to govern anyone else, except in the name of a moral law that is encoded in all good laws throughout human history. So that's the American solution, and it's the sense in which America is the most Christian country. It is, but you have to include the principle of religious freedom as crucial to that.
Our friends on the left will pounce on that and say that you are proposing Christian nationalism. You're not. I just want to know, you see that as much as I do. It's sort of the title of every other new hot book on the left is the Christian nationalists are here to get us. We got a minute to the break. It's all hooey. I don't even know if it's worth your time to respond to. Do you even bother with it?
It doesn't. In the last 10 days, I've been repeatedly attacked for being and for not being a Christian nationalist. And that's no proof of my opinion. My opinion is that if you understand Christianity, you understand that in a strict sense, Christian nationalism is impossible because Jesus' kingdom is not of this world.
Correct.
And so, yeah, but it's also true that the principle of freedom of religion is also a Christian principle because you have to volunteer to go to heaven.
Yes, you do. Don't go anywhere, America. 2 more segments with Dr. Arnn as we close out this week at the Hugh Hewitt Show. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn is back. We will continue with World War II, the Gathering Storm, Volume 1 of Churchill's 6-volume history of World War II next week. But, Dr. Arnn, I wanted to keep our focus on Israel for a moment. A broad question before I come to the specific one in the last short segment, whether it'll work. What make you of Netanyahu over the 2 years since Israel was caught by surprise and the slaughter of 10/7 happened? How do you judge his leadership?
Well, one of the few living people big enough to do that job. You know, they weren't ready, and so he has some responsibility for that. But they have since then been amazingly, first of all, brave and imaginative, and they have done wonders. And there's still many wonders left to do, and it's hard to imagine a time in the immediate or intermediate future where they can live in ease and comfort, but they seem to be up to the task, and he seems to be up to the task. And I pray that he will continue to thrive.
You know, their conception of the threat didn't include Hamas, but he was, in a couple of weeks, we'll come to a part where Churchill's excluded from the last Baldwin government, and he was deeply disappointed, but he said, unseen wings beat above my head, meaning he did not have to participate in the policy of appeasement, which gripped the entire group of Brits who were in charge of the country at that point. So he was not tainted by it at all. Now, the opposite of not being tainted at all is to have everyone tainted by it. And, of course, Netanyahu wasn't in the government. He wasn't in charge for 20 months of the 30 months before 10/7. Does that help him in maintaining his political life when they go back to the polls, or do you expect him to withdraw?
Goodness knows. I mean, Churchill writes, we'll get to the book in volume 3 of this Second World War we're reading. He writes that wherever there are 3 Jews, there are 2 prime ministers and 1 leader of the opposition. So, you know, from David Ben-Gurion to Benjamin Netanyahu, no prime minister has been the leader of a party controlling an outright majority in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. They're always very divided. They're always arguing. So I don't know what's going to happen about that. You know, the mitigating thing is whether, you know, and I don't know the details of exactly what he did to get ready for a possible attack from Gaza. But the truth is, it's very hard, and it will sometimes go wrong if you've got a problem right on your border, and it can emerge at any time. And they were using a lot of electronic means to monitor that constantly, and they were very sophisticated. And people write that they relied on that overmuch, and they'll be more alert. You know, as Churchill loved to say, we will not repeat the mistakes of the past. We will make new mistakes. And nobody saw that coming. And there'll be other things like that. I wouldn't be surprised. Because it's very difficult, you know, because what they're doing is living on their side of the border, going about their lives. They're not plotting every day to go over there and kill all the Gazans. But over in Gaza's side, they are doing that. And then once in a while, they think up something pretty clever, and they do it. And that's hard to, you know, who would have thought that a bunch of people with box cutters would take flying lessons, not learning how to land the planes, and seize an airplane with box cutters and fly them into buildings and kill thousands of people. Nobody saw that coming. Now we're all ready for that, right? We got all kinds of things in place. And that means next time it'll be something else. It'll be something,
you know, I pointed out to Habib, one of the lessons of 9/11 we've forgotten is we thought that it was just 19 people with a tail of a few dozen back to Afghanistan, when in fact it's tens of millions of Wahhabis, not all of Islam. I'm talking about radical Islamists who want one unity, one polity, one rule via the Quran over everyone. And it's an extremely radical version of Islam that is not representative Islam. But we tend to minimize that problem after 25 years. At least that's my view. And Haviv doesn't think that's going to happen to Israel because we're a big country with a lot of different problems and a lot of different arguments. Israel's a little country with 10 million people and enemies on all sides of it, and it focuses the mind. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, yes, certainly. But that has dangers of its own, and it probably is not possible to guard against them perfectly as October 7 proves.
Another historian and journalist, Eli Lake, has made the comment, not this week, but last, that without question, and it's not even close, Donald Trump is the best president ever for Israel. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah. Well, I mean, hard to think of him doing any better. You know, Harry Truman wasn't bad.
He recognized it, but he didn't send him any weapons. That was the argument of distinction there.
Yeah. And, you know, nor really could you expect him to. You know, the independence comes, I haven't looked up for years the timeline, but it's pretty tight. The date of independence comes, and the Arab states have armies on the border of Israel, and they're going to invade. And Harry Truman decides to recognize Israel. And it was recognized by the United Nations, for whatever that's worth. So I'm not sure about the timeline, because the decision to do it was, you know, controversial and took some thinking. And I don't think it was long before the actual date.
No, Truman needed the weekend. Truman agreed to, as I recall, recognize Israel. Then he needed a few days to persuade a few more people to go along in the General Assembly. They got enough people in the General Assembly to agree, and then the UN voted, and then the Arab armies invaded. And then Israel won. Yeah. But it took 2 years, almost as long as this war. Until this war, the War for Independence was the longest. Israel's not built for long wars. They're a reservist army. They're not a standing army. They've got a standing army, but it's not anywhere near big enough to fight this war on 7 fronts. Oh, stand by, Dr. I'm going to come back to ask you about optimistic or pessimistic about the wrap-up of this in our last segment of this week's Hillsdale Dialogue. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. You've heard me say, so you don't have to hear me say it again, I'm an optimist that these negotiations are going to work out and the hostages will be free soon. But I want to know if Dr. Arnn is, do you think the Gazan war is going to come to an end and remain at an end for a significant period of time, Dr. Arnn?
Well, the future, though imminent, is obscure.
Yes.
Who knows? Hamas, the leadership, and who knows how many of them are still alive, by the way, but they're very wicked. You know, they sponsored rape and pillage and took videos of it on innocent people and women and children and tortured them and did videos of it and broadcast the videos. Those are pretty bad people. And so if they can work wickedness, they will. And the question is, how many of them remain? A lot of them are dead. And what is the spirit of the replacements? I'm not optimistic about that. So the real question is, how much is their ability reduced? And it's extensive. And so I think the hostages will get out and there'll be relative peace to the extent that their power is compromised. And it may be. And looks to me like, it's very... One thing that's fun to watch about Donald Trump is I can't get it out of my head anymore. I've been trained to believe that, politics is different and harder than commerce, which is itself difficult and hard. But Trump is, he's put together a bunch of really complicated deals. And so he's working on one right there, right now. He's got lots of features and lots of moving parts and lots of people involved. And he and his team seem to be very good at getting in a room with people and figuring out what their interest is and what will move them. And so he may just pull this off, and I certainly hope so.
It's also a wonderful thing to be underestimated. And if he isn't the most underestimated president ever, W once said he was misunderestimated. And I think that applies to Donald Trump as well. Last question. Do you think he is underestimated by his enemies?
Those who still hold him in contempt, they hate his enemies hate him and regard him as formidable. And in one way, they sort of overestimate him then lately because they think he's the whole problem. But the larger problem is there's just a whole bunch of people who don't agree with them. And try though they might, they've been unable either to persuade or to force them. And so so a lot of people, in the beginning, they certainly, there's an argument and some evidence. They wanted him in 2016 because obviously they could beat him. That was a mistake. 2020, they thought they could. After 2020, they thought they could put him in jail and take his assets and eliminate him from politics. That was
a bigger mistake. On that note, Dr. Arnn will be back next week. We will be back in the gathering storm. Get your book out at Chapter 7. We're beginning there, and we'll go as far as we can, and we'll keep going. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Harley. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Dr. Arnn. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. See you on Monday.